This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on ranking of states on startup ecosystem. The participants are Anil Agarwal, Joint Secretary in Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and Rajesh Rai, journalist.
What exactly was the idea behind this ranking exercise when it was started?
The Startup India mission was launched in January 2016. And while launching the Startup India program, our Prime Minister had laid down a very clear view of what he wants from the startups. He said, हमारे ऐसा कोई जिला न हो, ऐसा कोई block न हो, जहाँ से कोई startup न बना हो. Now, when we started in 2016, nobody knew what a startup is. Very few people who have worked in other countries where there is a lot of startup culture, they knew what startup was. Even in government, understanding about startups was not there. So the biggest task was, first of all, to educate officers in Government of India itself to various concepts of startups and how we could promote innovation and entrepreneurship. So Startup India action plan was made. It had 19 action points spread over different areas where, we wanted to make it easy for startups to do their business. Regulations were to be reduced. Funding was to be increased, and other institutional arrangements like incubation and other things were to be done. But nobody understood in the state what an incubator is, what is seed funding, what is venture funding. Now nobody understood this. The idea was that we need to educate and build capacities across all our states. If we want to reach all the districts, we are not talking of the blocks at this point. Let us at least target all the districts. So with this thought, we decided to start a ranking of the states.
Which are the different indicators and parameters, sir, over which we are ranking the states and UTs?
Now, please understand, what is a ranking exercise? How do we do that? So, what we did was, first of all, we, surveyed the best of the ecosystems in the world. There is the US, Silicon Valley, there are Europe. In the Southeast Asia also, there are very good ecosystems which promote startups and entrepreneurships. So teams were sent to study these ecosystems and then identify as to what are the things that government can do to promote these startups. So then, a number of areas or the reform areas were identified. And then we decided to list certain standards. How do you say that what needs to be done? So you identify good practice. So there were some states like Karnataka, they were ahead of others who were promoting startups, although that was in IT field, but they were ahead. So they understood what, startup is and how they need to be taken up. Similarly, there were other states who were doing, something or the other. So different areas, we identified good practice. And then based on the good practices, everyone can't reach the best at the beginning. So let's set out some minimum standards on what a state government should do if they want to promote innovation and entrepreneurship in their area. So then, in 2018, we designed the first startup ranking phase. And then there were 7 broad areas where, reforms were to be done. So across those reform areas, we identified a number of action points. So this is how this entire ranking framework has evolved over the last 2 years.
Any other country which carry out such exercise?
For a country like India, as diverse as India, and with the distribution of powers between the government of India and the state government, with most of what is to be done at the field level, that is at the level of the state government, with the federal structure that we have, a lot needs to be done by the state government themselves. So in our, constitutional framework, we can't do things directly. It can only be done through the state. So the best thing is, to motivate them positively towards making some objectives which we convince them that, look, this is something good and this will not only help your state, your citizens, it will also help the government, it will help all citizens of that particular state. So it is about bringing a consensus. So that is how we try to build capacity.
How many states and UTs are currently participating in this exercise, sir?
This time we had 22 states and 3 union territories. So 25 states. Out of, we have total 28 states now and 8 UTs. So out of 36, 25 entities participated.
Why they are reluctant, the other ones, sir?
It is not about that. See, it's about this time the ranking framework is very tough. In fact, first ranking framework, we only said that this is what you have to do. And if the state government said, look, these are the documents, and they would show us orders, that look, we have issued this order, so we will accept. Now you've done this reform, so you will get marks. This time, what we did was, we said, no, only issuing orders is not enough. 76% of all the marks that are allotted this time are based on feedback from the actual user. 76% marks will come only from beneficiaries. If 70% of beneficiaries, which we will call them, if they say yes, they've got this benefit, then only we will give those marks to the state, otherwise we will not give marks. So this time it's been very tough in fact.
But are those left ones ready to participate in the next years?
For each of the states, we have assigned one member of our Startup India team, coordinates with the startup team of that particular state and take care of all their requirements. So we are developing, help them build policies. What should be a startup policy? So a new state, for example, would not know what is a startup policy. But now policies are also evolving and there is healthy competition coming up between the states. One state has done one policy and the other one says, okay, they have done this, I will try and do better. So every policy which is coming up now is better than the previous policy.
Do we share the best practices of states to each other so that they can improve upon those areas?
Yes. So what we do is we did what we call them as knowledge sharing workshops. So we asked states if you are willing to, share the good work that you have done with all the other states. Everybody is willing. So this time we organized 3 knowledge exchange workshops. So one was done in Rajasthan. So we invite all the other state governments to participate and come attend that knowledge exchange workshop which is being organized, for example, in Rajasthan. So Rajasthan would organize that event. They will showcase all the best practices. They will showcase their startups. They will showcase their investors, seed funds, venture funding, everything. So their, interaction also takes place. Then somebody from Karnataka will say, okay, you have done this, we are doing this. So, we learn from each other, number one. Secondly, what we've done is we have launched a compendium of best practices. So there are, 7 broad areas of support to startups that we have identified. Like, for example, institutional support. So there has to be a startup policy. It has to be online registration. There has to be a nodal team, things like that. Okay. Now, there has to be regulation. Has the state done something to simplify regulation? Then one reform area is about procurement. Are you doing some procurement from startups which are young and for where, comparative products are not available in the market? They are all innovative products. So naturally, those things are not available in the market. So are you making some policies to procure from the government department? Government is one of the biggest procurers. Then, there is one reform area on seed funding.
But in the government procurement, pricing of those products becomes sometimes challenging, sir.
Absolutely, yes. So, what happens is, there are different models that are followed in different governments. Kerala is one of the leading states in procurement from startups. See, you need to understand that when a startup quotes a price, it is not commercially available. And then they have made committees of officers who get into the reasonability of price. And then only up to a certain limit for a trial order can be given. But then that first order is the lifeline for that startup.
Because there is no other comparative product over which you can compare the prices.
Yes, but then, because the startup, when it is developing a product, it goes through a process of incubation. It goes through a process of evaluation by so many other team members that you can actually see what is the price and what is the cost that startup must have incurred on that particular product. It is always possible to, make reasonably good estimate of the price that the startup should be charging. And to encourage innovation, you need to do this. Like, for example, we do a number of grand challenges where there are critical needs, there are problems, research issues where we do not have a solution. So then, what we do is we will say that, okay, now this is a problem statement and I want to do a grand challenge, open up for all the startups to see whether you can solve this problem. And the government have to look at how you can procure them. Because the process that we have in the government, we need to specify each thing that we are buying. These are the specifications. Startup is giving you a new product. It is a new idea altogether. Applications are not available. So there are no comparative products available. So, some people follow a different model.
Sir, during these exercise, we are not announcing positions in terms of first, second, third, fourth, like we do in state ease of doing business ranking. Why we go for categories like best performer, top performer, leaders? Any specific advantage of this, sir?
We don't want to rank states in strictly numerical terms because we don't want to name and shame. We want to encourage everyone and say that, look, we are appreciating you for the effort that you have done till now. You need to do a little more. Whatever you have done, you've done well, and we would like to support you to do more. And if you see in all our results, in every category, We have named states and UTs alphabetically. There is no inter-se ranking between each of these categories. So it is just a way of giving pats on the backs of everyone. Look, you've done well and we want you to do better. So nobody should say, I am 25th rank and that is 18th rank. So that distinction we have consciously avoided.
Sir, this time we have also divided them in X and Y groups. It will create a bit of confusion, sir.
There is no confusion. Let me give you the rationale. When you are ranking states, what happens is somebody from the northeast state would say that how can you compare me with Karnataka, who is already a leader in startup ecosystem? How can you compare, for example, Tripura with Gujarat? You can't do that. So we divided all the states into two groups. One group would have all the union territories and the northeastern states. But then, here also, we removed Assam and Delhi. Because Delhi, although it is a UT, but for all practical purposes, Delhi should be competing with rest of the states. Similarly, Assam. That is why Y category and everybody else is clubbed in one category. This also gives an aspirational goal. So you need to compete amongst equals. So that is the rationale of X and Y category.
Sir, during the release of declaration of the result, today Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal sir also talked about adequate funding to startups, and he suggested that mutual funds, HNIs, Indian investors should come forward and invest in these startups. Are we working in this direction, sir? How we are trying to convince them to come and invest?
It has been increasingly felt that a lot of innovation that is happening within India is getting owned by others, by foreign funds. And then it is extremely important that the intellectual property of India should remain within India. And the startups that are developing here should be owned by Indians. So it is actually the domestic companies should have majority participation in startups that are homegrown. So we are trying to get insurance funds. We are also trying to get pension funds. And look at how they can create structures and institutional processes whereby they can safely invest in startups. If you look at Canada, Australia, their pension funds are coming here and investing heavily into our startup ecosystem. And they are all mature markets, so they will never invest in a risky proposition. They are investing here and they are picking up a lot of returns. So it is about, educating domestic investors who have surplus funds to look at this area as a potentially profitable area. National economy will grow when domestic funds are invested into innovation. Domestic funds are invested into our own intellectual property. Then only when you sell it outside India, then you will get more royalties and you will get better returns.
Have we started work on the state ranking framework 2020?
Yes. In fact, we already have some very good suggestions. Last time when we did this ranking framework, a number of feedback was received and then the framework should be tweaked a little. This time, ranking framework was much better, much more objective. And again, we have received valuable feedback from all the participants. We are incorporating that already. So we are already working on the next framework.
And how we are taking these feedbacks from startups, sir, like how we are approaching them?
When we want to take feedback from the beneficiaries, we make all the states give us complete details, contact numbers, email addresses of all the beneficiary startups that they are claiming that, these are our beneficiaries. So what we do is we, through a call center, we make calls to randomly selected startups. So, for example, if one state says that on this particular action point, I have 300 beneficiaries, startups. So then, what happens is, out of those 300, computer generates a random number and randomly 50 successful calls are made. And then those 50 people are asked in the local language. We called in 11 different languages. Because only when you speak to somebody in his own language, the real feedback comes out. So then, get the real pulse of what is happening across the states.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on ranking of states on startup ecosystem. The participants were Anil Agarwal, Joint Secretary in Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and Rajesh Rai, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our website newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.